Hi, this is Ed Driscoll. Welcome to Silicon Graffiti. Oh, sorry, let me switch my ABC editing mode off. Whew! Thanks, Charlie. After the 2004 presidential election, the left started billing themselves as the reality-based community, as opposed to those faith-based Christianist God worshippers on the other side of the aisle. And yet, the left isn't above invoking a higher power and asking if he'd be willing to do a little smiting of his own from time to time. We caught a sneak preview of this in September of 2004, when James Wolcott, currently a contributing editor to Vanity Fair magazine, wrote on his blog, "I root for hurricanes. When, courtesy of the Weather Channel, I see one forming in the ocean off the coast of Africa, I find myself longing for it to become big and strong, Mother Nature's fist of fury, Gaia's stern rebuke. Considering the havoc mankind has wreaked upon nature with deforesting, strip mining, and the destruction of animal habitat, it only seems fair that nature gets some of its own back and teaches us that there are forces greater than our own." And by that standard, Wolcott got his wish a year later, when New Orleans was nearly wiped off the map by Hurricane Katrina. As center-left blogger Mickey Kaus wrote in September of 2005, in the midst of Katrina wreaking havoc on the Gulf Coast, "I think it's because the hurricane and its New Orleans aftermath at least seemed to solve a big problem for anti-Bush commenters and politicians. Previously, they couldn't grouse about the Iraq War without seeming defeatist, and anti-liberationist, and maybe even selfishly isolationist. Even the Clintons never figured a way out of that trap. But nature has succeeded where they failed. It has opened up a way out, at least temporarily. In short, Katrina gives them a way to talk about Iraq without talking about Iraq. No wonder Gwen Ifill smiles the inner smile." Also in September of 2005, the hurricane caused hip-hopper Kanye West, less than 2 weeks after being dubbed the smartest man in pop music on the cover of Time magazine, to blurt out at a supposedly politically neutral fundraiser for Katrina victims hosted by the supposedly politically neutral NBC,
"George Bush doesn't care about black people."
All of which is why, at the end of last month, two very prominent Democrats were caught channeling either Gaia or Hurricane Wolcott or both. First up is Michael Moore talking with Keith Olbermann on August 29th.
Good evening, Keith. Thanks for having me back. And I was just thinking this Gustav is proof that there is a God in heaven. I have it planned at the same time. Yeah, that it would actually be on its way to New Orleans for day one of the Republican convention up in the Twin Cities at the top of the Mississippi River. I mean, certainly I hope nobody gets hurt. I hope everybody's taking cover. But
hey, that's just Mike. It's his job to make outrageous statements. But he certainly seems to be channeling something in the left-wing zeitgeist. Because one day later, Don Fowler, former national chairman of the Democratic National Committee, sitting next to fellow Democratic Congressman Jack Spratt of South Carolina on the flight back from the Democrats' convention in Denver, was surreptitiously caught on camera by a blogger at redstate.com saying this.
Unless the hurricane's going to hit New Orleans about the time they start. The timing is, at least it appears now, that it'll be there Monday. That just demonstrates God's on our side.
As of the date we're recording this edition of Silicon Graffiti, the video of Fowler requesting divine intervention and mass destruction for just slightly partisan purposes has currently been viewed over 366,000 times on YouTube, which is why, only a few days after his clip shot around the internet via Matt Drudge, Fowler issued a remarkably half-hearted, if that's the correct anatomical part to describe it, apology. One doesn't anticipate that one's private conversation will be surreptitiously taped by some right-wing nutcase, said Fowler, but that's the nature of what we're dealing with. Which is quite a contrast from what another prominent Democrat was saying in 2007, as Marcus Miletus of the Daily Kos gleefully wrote in May of that year, "Every appearance by a top Republican official or candidate should be recorded, every one of them. All it takes is one macaca incident to transform a race or create one where one didn't exist. A video can knock out prospective candidates before they even enter. And this is no longer about finding one big blunder to put on a campaign commercial. It's about using video and free technologies like YouTube to build narratives about opponents, using their own words at their own events. A couple of years ago, Jonah Goldberg wrote, quote, "Liberals are geniuses at unleashing social panics because A, it never occurs to them that their motives are anything but pure, and B, because they are almost exclusively focused on short-term tactics. And yet they are invariably shocked when these moral frenzies come back to bite them," unquote. And that's exactly what happened with Dan Fowler being caught in deep macaca on videotape. On the other hand, an extra video camera can work in a politician's favor as well. After ABC turned Charlie Gibson's interview with Sarah Palin last week into a melange of jump cuts and other very visible edits, Glenn Reynolds of Instapundit.com suggested that politicians bring their own cameramen to an interview to ensure that what the press reports was actually said and not doctored. But then, that same day, a still photographer hired by The Atlantic magazine admitted online that she's a, quote, hardcore Dem, and that she deliberately took a series of unflattering shots of John McCain for The Atlantic's cover. Fortunately for all concerned, The Atlantic chose the best of the deliberately unflattering photos for their cover story. But should a politician insist on his own photos being used by a magazine's art department as well? Probably couldn't hurt. For Silicon Graffiti, I'm Ed Driscoll.